Hi, this is Holly Haggerty, and I'm here this afternoon with Dorothy Davis for World Creativity and Innovation Week. We are celebrating creativity and innovation with Miss Dorothy Davis, who's going to be presenting celebrity advocacy as a tool of international development communities, creating the Goodwill Ambassador Program of the UNDP. So Dorothy has an amazing introduction biography presentation, so I'm just going to give part of it here because it's really difficult to do her justice in terms of everything she's done. Miss Dorothy Davis is the president of Dorothy Davis Consulting, an international development communications consulting and project management firm that troubleshoots and brings to life new organizations. Born in Liberia to U.S. Foreign Service parents and raised in Tunisia, Nigeria, Switzerland, and the USA, she graduated from Boston University School of Public Communications in 1976 and Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism in 1977. She marries the skills and experiences of her diplomatic and multicultural upbringing with her wide communications toolbox to create global narratives, solutions, and images for heads of states and governments and celebrities. She works with causes like the Sharif Market Women's Fund and institutions like Fortune Magazine, the African American Institute, and the United Nations. This has enabled her to carve out a unique career path that borrows from each part of her life on an as-needed basis and thrives at the nexus of private, public, and nonprofit sectors. She inherited this unique approach to the application of communication skills through osmosis from her father, Griff Davis, a pioneer photojournalist and diplomat who worked at the nexus of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement and the independence movement of Africa. She brings his legacy to life as president of Griffith J. Davis Photographs and Archives, which is an amazing exhibit that I had the pleasure and honor to be able to see and be toured through by Dorothy herself. So without further ado, I would like to turn the virtual floor over to Miss Dorothy Davis.
Thank you, Holly, for such a nice introduction and support of my dad's photography. Hello, everyone. As she said, I'm Dorothy Davis, president of Dorothy M. Davis Consulting, an international development communications and project management firm. My presentation today is about how celebrity advocacy is used as a tool of international development communications. I will use illustrations from experiences I have had with different clients, including some United Nations agencies and departments. I want to first acknowledge that the United Nations declared 2021 as the International Year of the Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. This further underscores the importance of this year's World Creativity and Innovation Week. As you might know, World Creativity and Innovation Day, April 21, was founded in 2002 by creativity specialist Marcies to provide time and a reason for people to use creativity in problem solving, to generate new ideas and use imagination to take positive action in the world. I was introduced to the concept of creative economy in December 2005 as a consultant for the then called Special Unit for South-South Cooperation of the United Nations Development Program. A small group of us representing different parts of the global South, like Jamaica, Trinidad, Pakistan, and Brazil, were brought together in Shanghai, China, to discuss how creative economy could enhance economic development in similar countries across the globe. For instance, if Jamaica could harness the proceeds generated worldwide by reggae, it could use that money for its own development purposes. The meeting coincided with the aftermath of the devastation of Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana in August 2005. I had family and friends who were severely impacted and displaced by it. Prior to attending the Shanghai meeting, I was informed of then Louisiana Lieutenant Governor Mitch Landrieu's decision to use the creative economy of Louisiana as an economic development tool to rebuild the economy of New Orleans and the state. Sitting in Shanghai, I saw the potential synergy between the two parallel conversations on different continents. At the time, President George Bush refused to accept the stream of contributions being offered from across the world to help rebuild, restabilize New Orleans and Louisiana. Offering such help would have been a normal global emergency response for any disaster around the world. Yet, in my opinion, the US did not want to be seen as needing help. Yet the people and state of Louisiana urgently needed that help. I thought that New Orleans would be a great gateway into the US market for creative products and services developed in the countries of the global South. Yet I knew it would be difficult to break through the stereotypical perspectives of the United Nations towards helping the US and the fears of Americans to work with the United Nations. To me, the common ground between them was using creative economy as a tool for economic development in their respective countries. Because each side knew me and trusted my background and experiences, I was given the mandate by my Brazilian supervisor at UNDP to explore the possibility of a partnership. The short version is that it resulted in the creation of a memorandum of understanding between UNDP's Special Unit for South-South Cooperation and the state of Louisiana. By the time this happened, Lieutenant Governor Mitch Landrieu had become mayor of New Orleans and brought the initiative to the city itself. The New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival became the example of how creative economy contributes to economic development. As a result of the MOU, the Special Unit for South-South Cooperation invited the state of Louisiana to present and showcase the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival as an example of the success of creative economy in the creative corridor at the UN Pavilion at the 2010 Shanghai World Expo. It was the only American city represented at the UN Pavilion. This is a very broad definition and example of the use and impact of celebrity advocacy. While the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival is not necessarily seen in the same category of celebrity as a famous actor or musician, the festival itself is an iconic event that's very well known globally. It has its own celebrity status in the larger community. For this reason, it becomes a beacon of success as an economic development tool that can be replicated elsewhere around the globe. It can also be seen as part of international development communications. The expression of the components of the festival as an enterprise is communicating a development concept, by example. International development communications as a field organically grew out of a necessity as formerly colonized countries became independent in the 1950s, and the growth of bilateral and multilateral international development between countries and through the United Nations. For me, I inherited the concept of international development communications from my father, Griff Davis. As background, he was the first roving editor for Ebony magazine. After graduating from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism in 1949, he became the only African American international journalist for Black Star Publishing Company before starting his 35-year Foreign Service career in 1952 as the first information officer at the first U.S. Embassy in Liberia and Africa. During this time, he used his array of photography, journalism, and diplomatic skills to shape the narratives and image of newly independent countries in order to convey their development realities and needs through global media outlets and the U.S. State Department, and to the U.S. State Department. An example of how he combined his skills to convey a message was his production of the first promotional film of Liberia entitled Pepperbird Land in 1952. Emerging actor Sidney Poitier was the narrator. He only required payment of $75 plus listing in the credits. My dad wrote the script, conceptualized, shot, and edited the film based on the research he conducted about Liberia in collaboration with the government of President William V.S. Tubman. This film provided Liberia with a new global image from the African perspective of one of only two independent countries in Africa at the time. The other one was Ethiopia. Essentially, he and others like him were trailblazers in the international development communications field before it had a label. While I grew up immersed in his example of the concept, I learned and honed the fundamental skills for international development communications from my undergraduate degree in broadcasting and film at Boston University and master's degree from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. Yet those courses and curricula were vertical, not linear. I was being trained to be a journalist or a broadcaster and follow a certain career track for each. Yet as a Foreign Service child, I had been brought up to think and experience in a linear pattern. So I kept breaking journalism career traditions until I realized very recently that international development communications is actually what I've been doing subconsciously. I recently found an official internal U.S. Agency for International Development memo written by my dad, Griff Davis, dated November 10, 1983, with the subject line, quote, comments on the draft policy determination on development communications, unquote. He wrote, the draft policy determination should be clarified by clearly defining and separating the terms development communications from communications development. Development communications concerns principally the preparation and utilization of software for the content of information and educational messages in support of USAID's development projects in developing countries, which seek to reach defined audiences within the total population and affect their behavior, hopefully for the better. This definition still stands today, yet in the context of the United Nations, international development communications supports the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals with the purpose of positively impacting the lives of people around the world. Celebrity advocacy is among the tools we use to promote humanitarian causes, to impact policy, or for people to take action. The best way to illustrate what I do in this field is by giving you a few examples of my work. So I have picked 3 to 4 examples. The first one I will discuss is the creation of the United Nations Development Program, Global Goodwill Ambassador Program. This was in line with, at the time, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan decided to use celebrity advocacy as a tool to increase the image of the UN worldwide and to get more support for the UN, probably particularly in the US. So UNDP followed the example that UNICEF had started. UNICEF was the first UN agency to have a Goodwill Ambassador program. It started with actor Danny Kaye and actress Audrey Hepburn back in the 50s. And they promoted the messaging for children through UNICEF. Okay, so when I came on board at UNDP, I was given the responsibility as special projects officer, as well as to create the Goodwill Ambassador Program. At the time, there was no Goodwill Ambassador Program and there was no Goodwill Ambassador. So within about 2 months of getting to this position, Danny Glover, the actor, agreed to be the first Goodwill Ambassador, Global Goodwill Ambassador for UNDP. It so happened that it coincided with 2 movies that were coming out that, like within the the following 6 months, Lethal Weapon 4 and Beloved. And so we at UNDP did not have an infrastructure to support the Goodwill Ambassador Program. And basically, I had to build the plane, fly the plane, and maintain the plane within about a 3-month period because we wanted to take advantage of the publicity that those two movies would bring to the causes that UNDP was pushing at the time. And at the time, it was eradicating poverty. So the other part of that was that Danny Glover wanted to premiere the Beloved film at the UN, and so that hadn't happened before either. And we wanted to raise money to support UNDP activities. So we had to create the U.S. committee for UNDP in order for there to be a 501c3 status, in order for people to give money to a nonprofit. The UN does not accept private donations. They only accept government donations. And so he started the program. Now, if you're familiar with Danny Glover, he's already very socially minded. He's involved in a lot of different causes in the US and around the globe, has been all his adult life at least. And what my role was, what I did was insert his being a celebrity as being the spokesperson that would attract a larger audience to the messaging that the UNDP was promoting. So the ways I did that was I would write his speeches for various events that he was invited to or that we created as a communications office at UNDP, or in collaboration with the Secretary General and his office. To be clear, the Secretary General has his or her, at some point, or her own grouping of Goodwill ambassadors, but they're called messengers of peace. And Muhammad Ali was one of them. I'm trying to think, a number of celebrities that one would know were messengers of peace. During the time that I worked with Danny Glover, I would arrange for press conferences. I would do write public service announcements, give him talking points. So if he's in front of the camera, he knows what points to push, and make sure that we get audiovisual coverage of his activities. Now, that Goodwill Ambassador Program grew to include Nadine Gordimer. She's gone now, but Nadine Gordimer, she was Nobel Laureate for Literature from South Africa and very much involved in the anti-apartheid movement, as well as a host of other things, but an excellent writer. She would write op-eds in her name that pushed the points that we wanted to push in terms of the fight against poverty globally as well as in different countries. We also had Dikembe Mutombo. He was our what do we call him? Special representative for youth. At the time he was in his basketball career. We also had two soccer players, Ronaldo of Brazil and Zinedine Zidane of Algeria / France. And we would tailor each of their portfolios according to their interest to who they were. But even though they were the celebrity, we did not focus on them as celebrity. They became the vehicle for what we wanted to say. I had one situation or one um, experience where Mrs. Annan, uh, essentially the first lady of the UN at the time, was going to have a lunch for the spouses of the heads of state and government who were coming to New York for to attend the special session that the UN was having in its fight against HIV/AIDS. And she wanted Danny Glover to be the speaker at the luncheon, and she wanted him to speak about girls and HIV/AIDS. And so I became the liaison between her personally, her office, and uh, and Danny in terms of the experiences he had had, so I could integrate his experiences as Goodwill ambassador around the issues of HIV/AIDS um, into the speech. And so I wrote the speech, and then I would give them drafts of the speech, and they would look at it, edit it according to what they thought needed to be in it, or to tailor it to their type of voice. And that's what happened. So my speech was read by Danny Glover in front of the spouses of heads of state and government who were at the luncheon that Mrs. Annan held. Um, and there are a number of situations like that um, that I had with him and with each of the other Goodwill ambassadors. Um, Another example of international development communications is with the African American Institute. The African American Institute started in 1953, and it was started essentially by the then president of Lincoln University in Pennsylvania and William Hansberry, who was a professor at Howard University. They had on both campuses African students who had been a bit stranded financially because they couldn't receive money from their home countries because in many instances their home countries were in the process of becoming independent. So they decided to create a pool of money to help sustain these students who were on campus. Well, it grew. The institute grew and became essentially the voice of Africa in the U.S. in terms of policy, and became a place where leaders in Africa who were involved with, let's say, the liberation movements, that the US government perhaps was not supportive of them, but supported the government that was in place. The African American Institute, through its policy conferences, was able to bring these two not so much opposing voices together, but at least create a platform for dialogue through these policy conferences that enabled both sides to start talking to each other, to become familiar with each other. So my role in that was I convened I created the conferences, meaning the logistical aspects, getting people's tickets, to fly to whatever country. In some cases, we had one in Egypt, we had one in Ghana, we had one in Namibia, and I would make sure that all the participants were comfortable, that they had everything they needed. I was like the go-to person for everything. I negotiated with the government, usually the Ministry of Information, not Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to work out what we needed as an institute from them as a government and vice versa. Um, and so that's the kind of work that is not necessarily um, hardcore writing speeches and so forth, but I did have to write invitation letters that were diplomatically written in a way that would encourage the participant to come. Um, and and then the other thing I did with the African American Institute was create the um, annual awards galas. These were strategically held during the UN General Assembly time when all the heads of state would come to New York, and we would have an annual awards gala where we would honor one head of state from Africa, and that was one way of showcasing that country to the US. And I would write the script for the MC. I would put the entire event together, from the vendors um, to arranging accommodations for all the honorees, to working with their respective staffs, and even though it seemed like uh, just an event, it really was a way to bring. It was another platform to bring people together who perhaps never met before, who perhaps never had the opportunity to talk to each other in a social setting, so that it was non controversial. And I think the third and perhaps the last one I'm going to talk about is the Sirleaf Market Women's Fund. I was, because of my background and my family's background with Liberia, I was invited to be a founding member of what became the Sirleaf Market Women's Fund in 2006 or 7. If you would remember, Liberia had gone through a pretty intense civil war, and all those images were splashed across our TV screens here, and pretty much that's all people knew about Liberia. And then suddenly it seemed Liberia elected the first its first female president, who also was the first female president in Africa. Excuse me. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. So a group of women who had worked with her in various parts of her previous career got together and asked her how we could help her with getting the country back in order, so to speak. And she suggested that we help the market women of Liberia. Now, the market women in Liberia are the women who sell their goods in open air markets. They aren't always, most of the time, they're illiterate, but they're very smart and very resourceful. In any case, during the Liberian Civil War, these women were the women who fed both sides of the war and were allowed to cross enemy lines in order to feed or to provide food. Now, in the process, a lot of them got raped, some were killed. I mean, all kinds of horrible things happened to them in the process. Also, on top of that, their husbands, many of their husbands were killed, and their sons were killed. And so they became heads of households that consisted of maybe 8 to 10 people, because they're not, those may not only be their own kids, but maybe they're the kids of their relatives who had died, that kind of thing. Okay, so she was very thankful to them for what they did for the country throughout and what they gave up. They gave up their education, they gave up great pieces of life, so to speak. So what we did is a group of international women. These are women from the UN system, from Liberia, from across the board, got together, and we created what became known as the Sirleaf Market Women's Fund. I gave the name. Now here, in terms of international communications, here you have our issue was, how do we raise money for these women or for our fund if the only image of Liberia is all the Civil War images that everybody knows. And so I suggested that we call it the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Market Women's Fund, because people here were very excited, obviously, about her being elected as the first female president. And so that's how it got its name. And she was very helpful in that we had, the other issue was, we had to get people to feel comfortable to give money and know that the money is going to go to helping these women build markets, structures, so that they didn't have to sell their goods in the sun or in the rain. So we started off with the objective, raising funds to build markets, physical markets in different parts of the country. We made sure that it was rural and urban, and across the country. So the role here was, when we had our first fundraiser, it was in New York, and I was trying to figure out how we're going to explain the lives of these women to essentially New Yorkers who have a much different life. And so what we did is, we had President Sirleaf, a celebrity, come to speak, and we publicized that she was coming. So we knew that she would be the draw, even if people in the audience either didn't know anything about Liberia or only knew about its issues. So she came, and we were able to get through UNIFEM, which is now UN Women, two market women were brought to the US for this occasion, and we created an event. I created the event with the support of the other women on the board. Now, in order to bring credibility to our fund, I knew that we needed to have certain celebrities that everyone could support. So we asked Cicely Tyson to be an honorary chair. She agreed. We asked Wangari Maathai, the founder of the Greenbelt movement, and she agreed. And we asked Maya Angelou, and she agreed. And so that helped bring the visibility of the organization up to a certain level in the US. And then we invited people to our fundraiser. And my role in it was to write the script, to go get any awards. I mean, write to the governor's office to get proclamations, organize the vendors who were going to sell there from the Liberian community in New York City, which was Staten Island for the most part, get the invitations out, just orchestrate the whole thing, get a video from Wangari Maathai that we could show. So it's all these different skills that come together. And as the organization grew, I was responsible for the newsletter, writing the newsletter. We eventually did a video about the entire organization that included the first executive director of UN Women, who at that point was the former president of Chile. and it was her first visit in that capacity overseas, or out, her first international visit in that capacity was to Liberia for International Women's Day celebration. So we were able to get footage relating to that and package it into a broader video to help us fundraise. As it turned out, then in 2014, I became chair of the organization. And of course, I say of course because no one could foresee this, but Ebola happened in Liberia, and I was chair along with, and I had a strong vice chair as well. And we had to then change everything overnight. In fact, it was President Obama's, he had a gathering of African heads of state in Washington, D.C., and President Sirleaf was scheduled to attend, but then the Ebola crisis expanded, just expanded, and she couldn't come in the end. We had planned a high-level conference with her included. We had invited people like Hillary Clinton and people in the women's feminist movement around the world to participate. They were planning to come, and we had to cancel it at the last minute because we were engulfed in this new situation. Well, we also had to change our whole mission overnight, pretty much. We couldn't focus on raising funds to build markets. We now realize that the issue was illiteracy in terms of trying to help the market women understand what they needed to do to protect themselves from getting Ebola. But you can't. It's not a society that depends on television. It's more on radio, and then you also have the issues of different dialects. Yes, everyone speaks English, but it's better to segment the message by radio into their various dialects. So we had to create public service announcements. I had to create public service announcements outlining what they needed to do to protect themselves. The market women, the leaders of the markets they were the celebrities as in this instance, from the standpoint that they were the leaders of their community, and so their community would listen to them. So we had them, we bought buckets so they could wash their hands, and we got disinfectant. We raised money for those kinds of things, but also to get the word out. And then in the US, we were doing speeches and interviews and so forth to raise money to help support this effort. So the market women, we were able to get funding from UN Women. They gave us a grant, and they helped us. I think by the end we reached about 5,000 women in terms of literacy training, and we decided that was our mission needed to change into that level versus focusing on structures. So anyway, we did close down though. We closed in 2017, and but we still remain a model. One of the things we also did, because of the platform that President Sirleaf's involvement essentially provided us with, is that we raised the image of market women across the continent and really in the world. The Liberian market women, we were able to take them to policy conferences that had to do near the African Union. The African Union is located in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and there was a side event for civil society called Gender is My Agenda campaign. And the idea was for women across Africa to talk about certain topics that related to the theme of that particular African Union Summit. And in the case, one year they were going to talk about cross-border trading. And we were able to have the then president of the Liberia Market Women's Association speak to this grouping. And it was the first time that a market woman had the platform to speak to such an august body of people. And her insight, she was very thrilled, and her insights were used in the policy making of the African Union. They listened to the struggles or the experiences that the market women had while trying to do cross-border trading. And so in that instance, I was writing the speeches, I was doing the what they call talking points, I was organizing the meetings between key people, and also getting the word out. I wrote President Sirleaf's speeches along the way, and so that's what I'm going to finish here. That's what I call international development communications, and I hope I've been able to illustrate all the various things that go into it. And I just wanted to end by saying that my company's motto is building bridges between people, cultures, and business. Thank you.
Dorothy, thank you so much. That is so inspiring and impressive, all of your work. The few times that I've heard you speak and tell the story, especially the one with the market women, it really is incredibly moving. So I really applaud you for everything that you've done. I wanted to find out, one of the attendees asked, what is the specific name of that Market Women's Initiative?
It's Sirleaf Market Women's Fund. We call it SMW.
Okay, great.
Sirleaf Market Women's Fund. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then one of the questions is, and one of the things I wanted to comment on is, I really like how you classify celebrities as people anywhere from government officials to, movie stars like Danny Glover, or such icons like Maya Angelou, and then also the women who led the market initiative themselves, because they were celebrities in their own area. So it really kind of makes one think in terms of using celebrities for a cause. It's not just the movie star, it's the people that are being listened to by those that you're trying to move in a direction. So I thought that was a really good distinction that you made.
Right. Well, if you notice in here with COVID, right, you see, we've all seen the pictures of President Biden getting his shot. You see, Fauci getting his shot. You see all the quote dignitaries getting their shots, but you also will see a religious figure say, yes, it's okay to do this, that kind of thing. So they are leaders too, and they are celebrities within their own confines, within their own grouping.
Yes, no, that's really good. And we definitely have people listening to you now that are very involved in communities. And so I think that distinction is really important to make. What do you think is the biggest advantage of working with celebrities? And in addition to just the enjoyment of it all, but what is the biggest advantage?
Well, okay, it depends on the celebrities, to be honest. I mean, luckily the ones that I worked with are very down-to-earth people, and yes, they're celebrities, and yes, they draw crowds wherever they go, kind of thing, but they don't take it to their head, right? They're really committed to the issues. So in that case, you're really working as a partnership. It's not so much a hierarchy as a partnership. for instance, what's her name? You know her. Okay, Brad Pitt's ex-wife.
Oh, Angelina Jolie.
There we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Okay, so Angelina Jolie, she came to, I think it was 2000, in 2001. Secretary General Kofi Annan had a gathering, what it was called, a gathering of messengers of peace and global goodwill ambassadors. And so about 70 of them came together, and she was one of them. She was just starting out as a goodwill ambassador for UNHCR, the refugee program. And I think through that experience, this is the other thing that happens, is as each celebrity gets more involved in the issues and meets the people on ground who are going through whatever the topic is, or the topic is, they learn. They're constantly learning, and they're constantly changing, not so, I'll say evolving their perspectives by the information that they're getting. And so in a sense, they become even richer as an individual than maybe when they started, because they're exposed to so many different things,
Right.
and they're able to connect it with even their own lives. Um, for instance, Danny Glover's, one of his brother died of HIV/AIDS, right? And that was his personal experience of it. And so therefore he wanted to do whatever he could on that issue, and became a really good spokesperson for that, going forward. That's just one level, but
Yeah. No, that's terrific. So, Dorothy, what's next for you? What is your moving forward? What are you looking at? I know you're very involved in the exhibit of your of Griff Davis's photography. Is that kind of your emphasis now, or what is your emphasis these days?
well, I do both. I
Yeah.
do both, because I see my father's photography and his legacy as a way to discuss international development communications, or to showcase it. So I integrate it at some level, but in terms of my, let's say, my own life, in terms of my own life, I'm still involved. I'm representing the Congressional Black Caucus Institute at the UN. And what that is to make sure that the focus of African Americans and Americans on is to make sure that the Sustainable Development Goals are seen also from the American perspective. It's like to connect the dot between us as a country and us as global citizens. And so that enables me to speak to the variety of UN agencies. I already have a lot of experiences with a whole bunch of UN agencies, and so I find ways to work with them on different events, on shaping uh, uh, narratives around different issues. So that's what I'm doing.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is so impressive. Well, we're going to go ahead and end off here and get ready for our next presentation. But I want to thank you so much, Dorothy. It's just incredibly impressive, everything you've done. And I just want to thank you for your service. And I want to thank you for being with us today. It's really wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
All righty.
What you're doing is great too.
Thank you.